Hello everyone, today's topic is on diencephalon. So diencephalon is a deeper part of forebrain. It is the posterior part of forebrain where it caudally continues to form the midbrain and other parts of brainstem. So diencephalon means in between brain. So the literal meaning of the diencephalon, it is in between brain because it connects the telencephalon with midbrain. So it is a part of forebrain, diencephalon. Forebrain has got two parts, telencephalon and diencephalon. So diencephalon is the submerged part of the brain which continues down as the midbrain, whereas the telencephalon is most evolved in humans, which forms the sulci and gyri of the human brain. So diencephalon, it is seen as just below the lateral ventricle. So medial sagittal section, if we take the brain, we can see the corpus callosum. So this is the corpus callosum and this is the lateral ventricle, which is covered by a layer of white matter which is called as septum pellucidum, and beneath that we can see the fornix as well. Below the fornix is the diencephalon. So diencephalon caudally it continues to form the midbrain. So here we can see the midbrain, and the cavity of the diencephalon is the third ventricle. So in coronal section, here the other side is the coronal section where we can see the cavity of the diencephalon, which is nothing but the third ventricle. On each side of the third ventricle, here are the nuclei forming the diencephalon. So we can see the diencephalon, the thalamus, the major part of the diencephalon is formed by thalamus and hypothalamus. So the thalamus forms the lateral wall of the third ventricle. So the medial boundary of it forms the lateral wall of third ventricle, and laterally it faces the internal capsule. This is the internal capsule, and superiorly it forms the floor of lateral ventricle, forms the medial part of it forms the floor of lateral ventricle. So we know the diencephalon is between the cerebrum and brainstem. That is the reason it is called in between brain, and it is divided into two parts, pars dorsalis and pars ventralis. So if you draw an imaginary line from the foramen of Monro, so which is an interventricular foramen where the two right and left lateral ventricles communicate with each other, and they also communicate with the third ventricle. So this section is taken in the sagittal view, in the mid sagittal section. So from the interventricular foramen of Monro, if you draw a line, a sulcus, which is almost like S-shaped sulcus, towards the aqueduct of Sylvius or cerebral aqueduct. So cerebral aqueduct is the cavity of midbrain. From the foramen of Monro, interventricular foramen of Monro, to the cerebral aqueduct, the imaginary line or a faint sulcus which is present, it is called as hypothalamic sulcus, which divides the diencephalon into two major parts, pars dorsalis and pars ventralis. This is pars dorsalis and here is the pars ventralis. Pars ventralis is formed by hypothalamus and subthalamus. So pars ventralis contains two components, hypothalamus and subthalamus. Pars dorsalis contains the thalamus, which makes the major part of pars dorsalis. Metathalamus includes medial and lateral geniculate bodies, which are nothing but the posterior projections of the thalamus, and also the epithalamus, which contains the pineal gland, habenular nuclei, habenular commissure, posterior commissure. So these are the components of epithalamus. So the